In this video, I am going to explain economic integration. Economic integration forms a part of many syllabuses of UG and PG course in economics and commerce in many of the universities. And what is economic integration? In fact, economic integration refers to the commercial policy of discriminatively reducing or eliminating trade barriers only among the nations joining together. Let us suppose that India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka join together to form a union. A union in the sense that they form a group. And so these three nations will reduce or eliminate trade barriers among themselves. But they will adopt uh, trade barriers against the non-member countries. That means when one economic integration is formed by certain countries, they will adopt a policy of discriminately reducing or eliminating trade barriers only among the nations forming that group or joining together to form that group or that union. So that's what's meant by economic integration. So the theory of economic integration refers to the commercial policy of discriminatively reducing or eliminating trade barriers only among the nations joining together. And why is the word discriminatively used here? The reason is that they will reduce and eliminate trade barriers among the member nations, only among the member nations. But towards other nations, they will continue to have the same kind of trade barriers, or they will continue to introduce that same kind of trade barriers with other non-member countries. The degree of economic integration ranges from preferential trade arrangements to free trade areas, customs union, common markets, and economic union. So based on how much integration takes place, based on the extent of that integration, range of the integration or degree of integration, we have different type of economic integration like preferential trade arrangements, free trade areas, customs union, common markets, and economic unions. So in this video, we will be discussing these important forms of economic integration. First, we shall take up for discussion preferential trade arrangements. What is preferential trade arrangements? This is the simplest form of economic integration or very loosest form of economic integration. Preferential trade arrangements provide lower barriers. Please understand that we are not removing the barriers. Barriers are still there, but the thing is that we lower barriers. We decrease the extent of barriers. So preferential trade arrangements provide lower barriers on trade. What are barriers on trade? Barriers on trade are of two types. One is trade tariff barrier and the other is the non-tariff barrier. So these kinds of barriers will be lowered on trade among participating nations than on trade with non-member nations. So non-member nations will continue to have a different kind of treatment from these countries. But member countries, among the member countries or participating nations, the nations forming this trade agreement will try to lower barriers on trade. But at the same time, they may have different kind of barriers being applied towards the non-member nations. So preferential trade arrangements provide lower barriers on trade among participating nations than on trade with non-member nations. So means in the case means if you take the other example which I have just said, that is the example of India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka forming a, a, a preferential trade agreement. So what happens is that India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka will try to lower barriers on trade among these three nations. But towards the other countries, for example, towards the United States, India may have a different kind of trade, different kind of means different set of trade barriers. This is the loosest form of economic integration. So preferential trade arrangement is the loosest form of economic integration. The best example of preferential trade arrangement is the British Commonwealth Preference Scheme established in 1932 by the United Kingdom with members and some former members of the British Empire. Now we come to the next form of economic integration, which is called a free trade area. So this is a one step forward from the preferential trade agreement. So a free trade area is a form of economic integration wherein all barriers are removed on trade among members. So here there is no barrier. In preferential trade agreement or preferential trade arrangement, there is a lowering of barriers. Barriers are still there, but barriers are lowered. But when it comes to free trade area, barriers are removed. No tariff barrier, no other kinds of non-tariff barriers. Both barriers, tariff barrier and non-tariff barriers are removed on trade among members, but each nation retains its own barriers to trade with non-members. So when you trade with the non-members, then you can have, or the nation can have all kinds of barriers. But when in a free trade area, a country has to remove all type of barriers against the member nations. What are the best examples? The best examples are the European Free Trade Association, formed in 1960 by the United Kingdom, Australia, Denmark, Norway, Portugal, Sweden, and Switzerland. One more example, the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which was formed in 1993 by the nations like United States, Canada, and Mexico. Now, customs union. This is yet another form of economic integration. So this is again one step forward from the free trade area, or two steps forward from the free trade agreement. A customs union allows no tariffs or other barriers on trade among members, just like in free trade area. And in addition, it harmonizes trade policies, such as setting of common tariff rates towards the rest of the world. What does it mean? So let us take the example of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka forming a customs union. So if we form a customs union, then not only are we adopting a policy of no tariff and other barriers on trade among member nations, but also we will be having the same kind of tariff policies against the rest of the world or against the non-member countries. That means if India is adopting a particular tariff policy against United States, Sri Lanka will also adopt that. Pakistan will also adopt that because we have formed a customs union. We have a common policies against the rest of the world, or we have common policies toward the rest of the world. So that is what's when we customs union. So a customs union allows no tariff or other barriers on trade among members, just like in the free trade area. And in addition to that, it harmonizes, synchronizes trade policies such as setting up of common tariff rates toward the rest of the world. The most famous example is the European Union, European Common Market, formed in 1957 by West Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Now, a common market. This is again a one step forward from the customs union. A common market goes beyond a customs union by also allowing the free movement of labor and capital among member nations. See the difference? When it comes to the common market, we have free movement of labor and capital among member nations. If India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka were to form a common market, Indians would move easily to Pakistan without any visa and passport. Indians would move to Sri Lanka without any passport and visa. That means there is free movement of capital and labor. Factory movement is free across the boundaries of the member countries. That is the meaning of common market. So a common market goes beyond a customs union by also allowing the free movement of labor and capital among member nations. The European Union achieved the status of a common market at the beginning of 1993. That's a classical example of that. In 1993, European Union achieved the status of a common market. Now, economic union. It goes still further by harmonizing or even unifying the monetary and fiscal policies of the member states. So in economic union, if I again take the example of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka forming an economic union. If these three countries were to form an economic union, then there would be, these three countries would be adopting same monetary policy, same fiscal policy. What fiscal policy India is adopting, the same thing will be adopted by Pakistan, the same thing will be adopted by Sri Lanka because of the reason that these countries form a kind of economic union. So if India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka were to form an economic union, then each country would be following or these three countries would be following a common monetary and fiscal policies. That's the meaning. So an economic union goes still further by harmonizing or even unifying the monetary and fiscal policies of member states. This is the most advanced type of economic integration. Example is Benelux, which is the economic union of Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. And this was formed after the World War II and now a part of the European Union. So this is a classic example of economic union. Benelux, which is the economic union of Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Then we have duty-free zones or free economic zones. An interesting recent development that can be analyzed with same concepts used to analyze customs union is duty-free zones or free economic zones. These are areas set up to attract foreign investment by allowing raw materials and intermediate products duty-free. So these are set up just to attract the foreign investor. This is also a form of economic integration. The main purpose of this type of duty-free zones or free economic zones is to attract foreign investment. So we have explained different forms of economic integration. We started with the differential trade arrangement. This is the loosest one. So here we member nations lower tariffs or barriers among themselves and adopt separate barriers against the non-member nations. When it comes to free trade area, the thing is that the tariffs are not only lowered, they are removed. They are removed. No tariff policies, no non-tariff policies. And now customs union. Here, in addition to what we have seen in free trade area, here in customs union, common trade policies will be adopted by the member nations towards the rest of the world. Common market means free movement of capital and labor. Economic union means there is a harmonization of monetary and fiscal policies among member states, and we have other forms of economic integration like duty-free zones or free economic zones. The purpose of this is to attract foreign investment by allowing many concessions, many free trade, duty-free facilities to raw material import, export, and intermediate products. So with this, we end the discussion on economic integration.